Policy Committee. We have with us this evening councillors and officers, and we will progress through our meeting remotely but hopefully successfully. So we will now go to our agenda, and I will ask Abigail, do we have any apologies for absence?
Hi, good evening, Chair. We've received apologies from David Littlewood.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is our Code of Conduct and Declarations of Interest. Please, could anybody who has anything to declare do so now? No declarations of interest, thank you. And please can we confirm that the minutes of the last meeting held on the 29th of January 2020 are a correct record? Those who were present at the meeting, if they can confirm. Thank you. And now we move on to our first and only main agenda item, which we kept as a single item because of the amount of discussion that we expect to be within this. And we have the discussion about food banks, food share in our town. Our first presentation is from Tracy Williams to tell us about the Warrington Food Pantry. Can I hand over to you, please, Tracy?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Warrington Food Pantry is a joint project between Warrington Borough Council, Tourist, Clarion and Warrington Food Bank. It's been supported by Warrington Voluntary Action, Sellafield and local businesses like Greencore, the Co-op, Morrison's and Asda. Those kind of places have made donations. So what is a food pantry? So the Warrington Food Pantry project is designed to enable customers to take a step up from food banks and food shares and start accessing the food ladder using Main Street shops. So the pantry food offer is practical support, but the main aim of the pantry is to offer customers a wraparound service to improve life chances. This, could be working with a customer from where they are to look at their financial and employment circumstances, as well as their own health and well-being. And the idea of the pantry first emerged from the Welfare Reform Partnership, which had highlighted an emerging need to support people who are struggling to pay basic household bills, often choosing between food, heating the homes, or paying a bill. So the aim of the pantry as well is to support people who face life barriers, and it's an asset-based approach where we draw on the strength and potential in the community, looking for volunteers or the need for it and who could run it. So we wanted to provide affordable and wholesome food and to develop a sustainable non-for-profit model and to connect to other services. So a client wasn't just coming, getting food for 6 months and then we wouldn't see them again, because that way then we hadn't addressed anything. So we wanted to offer more of a holistic approach that touched on everything really. So the history of the pantry, next slide please Adam, is the area was identified for the following reasons. It had a higher area of deprivation, 555 tenants in the area are on some sort of benefit, universal credit or housing benefit. There were 707 tenants who were working age and of those 355 are on a benefit. And as a pilot project, we had the support and partnership of the 2 main housing providers in the area. We had a local WBC building that could house the project, and we had a lot of feedback from the food bank of the area people were coming from who used it. So it was a huge indicator that there was food poverty in that area. So next slide, please. So what's the difference? So in a food share, well, in a food bank, there's 1,200 food banks in the Northwest, and the service provides food, what they get from donations to people can access it who are at crisis point, and they're like an emergency food parcel. So to access them, you usually need a food voucher and referred into the service, into the food bank. So what's the food share? Well, none of us can afford to throw away good food, and that's why stores give products that are going out of date to local community groups at the end of each day to prevent food waste. So it's estimated that over 3 million meals have been donated, which would have gone to landfill. So non-for-profit groups can use this food and share with their communities. And although the community groups do a brilliant and valuable job, we've got to be careful that we're not creating a dependency on that service, that it's the same people who are going to do Monday down at Busey, Tuesday at Longford, that kind of thing. And we've got to try to avoid creating a dependency. Next slide. So partners and donators. So the Warrington Food Pantry main partners are Taurus Housing, Clarion, Warrington Food Bank, Warrington Voluntary Action and Fair Share. And there's been a management committee formed, and those groups have given financial support to buy fridges and freezers and other products we needed to set up the pantry. We've also got money from Sellafield and from the SIF fund, because as a major startup, it was quite expensive to buy the things that we needed, because when we got members coming in the pantry, they'd often just use microwave meals. They didn't have a pan to cook on or a cooking utensil, a spoon. So when a new member joins, every member gets a startup bag containing basic items, utensils, spices, salt and pepper, that kind of thing, some oxo cubes. And they get recipe ideas. So if that week Fair Share have been and donated a load of mince, we would print out recipe ideas, what you can do with mince to feed a family of 4. So there was different ideas. So when the client comes in and you take all their information and sign them up, then we offer financial help, benefit advice, access to other services, wellbeing, credit union, and it's like a holistic approach. A cup of tea, they can have a chat with other members. So that friendly chat gets people talking and gets people at ease and telling you what's going on in their lives. So that's been quite good as well. So volunteers, next slide, please. So the pantry is run by volunteers with support from the neighbourhood team. Now, getting the right quality of volunteers is important, as commitment was essential for the smooth delivery of the pantry. And often we had fantastic volunteers, but they couldn't commit to many hours. So often staff had to stand in, which wasn't a good idea, but you know, we got through it. So training was offered at the beginning, but at the time the volunteers we had couldn't commit to it. So going forward, training will be provided by Warrington Voluntary Action, who will recruit and support at every stage. And I think that is a much better option, and that was a real valuable lesson learned, because I think we was too hands-on as well at the beginning, whereas another organisation were better with volunteers than we was. Next slide, please. So the pantry opened 3 sessions a week, Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, and every Friday we'd get a delivery off Fair Share. So we paid every quarter for the stock from Fair Share, and the items delivered, hit and miss, some weeks fantastic products, and you know, all members got a really good share of it. Other weeks there was unusual stuff, you know, like duck legs and seafood, prawns and mussels, and to the average family, what will I do with this? I don't know what to do with this. So I think we'd be a bit smarter on how we did that as well, maybe buy it in differently. And the food bank often donates non-perishable items that they've got a lot of stock, like the cereals and the beans. So next slide. Thank you. So the pantry supports 40 members and their families at any one time. They pay a weekly membership, and to become a member they have to live in the WA2 areas or to have been referred in by a partner from another area. They could have joined, you know, we did emergency parcels and we provided emergency support when needed. So everybody gets a household benefit check, and that could have been as well an income check to check the gas and the electric, make sure they're getting fair deals, because a lot of our families were still on the prepayment cards, which is, you know, we all know is the dearest way to use it. So a lot of them have used the toy appeal, and they signed up for cookery lessons that was run in the centre. This lady came in one day, she had a pot of money to deliver it, and we got our customers to attend that, so that was really good. Some of the families have opened credit union accounts and access services offered within community centres, you know, like the craft groups and the coffee mornings and chat groups. So it's opened up for them as well. Next slide, please. So membership lasts for 6 months, and this is to prevent dependency. So for the money that they pay, they will get 3 days worth of food for a breakfast, dinner and tea. Sometimes it's more dependent on if we've got a you know, a big donation. That's roughly, that picture is what they'd expect to get, and you could make a meal for 3 days for a family out of that. There's menu cards around the pantry to show people what to do and how to do it. Next slide, please. So there's different food parcels available. They were catered for vegetarians, vegans, gluten intolerant, you name it, we had them all. We had menus up, recipe cards, and staff and volunteers are aware of dietary needs. We had to be very careful with that, so it was involved with food hygiene, who looked at what we were selling, well, sort of selling, I suppose, and what we could give away. So we had to put signs up, you know, this may have nuts in, this may not, that kind of thing. All the products are colour coded, so instead of dealing in money, you're dealing in value. So the red meat and fish is a red item, amber, cakes, frozen meals, fridge food and vegetables and tinned were green items. And they could fill the basket to the value what we had in. We call them like manager's specials. So there was baby products, ladies products, baby chocolates, are all optional extras, and that's not counted as part of the food offer. So the last day we had the pantry open was the 17th of March last year, so it's not been open since then due to COVID. But a lot of those people we helped through the safe and well. We've had online meetings to discuss best practice, lessons learned and the way forward. And our plans for January was to recruit new members and training of volunteers, which Warrington Voluntary Action have kindly done, and they would have access to recognised qualifications which would help them, the volunteers, going forward in their lives. So summing up, the Pantry is short-term to lift members out of food poverty. It empowers individuals to make informed choices. It would build confidence, allows access to training, jobs and volunteering. It can be a pathway into other services, learn new skills, cookery, shopping, budgeting. And that's about it. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and if you've got any questions, please ask. Thank you, Adam. So thank you, Chair.
Sorry, my mute was on.
Oh.
Thank you, Tracy. And I saw that Sharon had a question. So if you'd like to ask that question.
Okay.
Thank you, Tracy, for your presentation, which was very interesting. I've just got a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yes.
What happens to people after 6 months? What was the plan for them then, if they hadn't become independent enough? And the other question, which I might ask at the same time, is if the pantry's not been open since March 2020, what has been going on for people during that period of time? Thank you.
Okay. After the 6-month period, if people wasn't ready to move on, we would had like a conversation, special meeting, and they could have been kept on a bit longer. We was never going to say to anyone, you've had your 6 months now, go on. We was never going to do that. And the conversation would have been had, more help put in place, and carried on for, and it's saying another month, another 2 months, that kind of thing. But when they signed up, they knew it was 6 months, and they knew that they would have to share their experiences and say to us why they didn't feel like they could move on. And what was the other question? Oh, what have they been doing since? Well, luckily, quite a lot of them was clients that we knew from that area. So some of them have gone on to, well, they've used the food bank when needed, and other local, you know, the community things that have popped up, the helping hands type of thing. But most of them have made big changes, because for a lot of people, it had a positive experience. A lot of the younger families went on to do some training, not, you know, with partner agencies, especially on the Clarion estate, and they've been supporting them, the Clarion housing. There's lots of training going on over there, IT training, and education packages. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any questions for Tracy? No? Okay. I think that was an excellent insight into what the pantry did, and we can do in the future. And I think also there's lots of things that we could share with the food share offers, the doorstep type offers, to make that a more of a lead into the pantry or food bank, or to help people move on. So I think there's a lot of work there that we can share and help things along. It certainly made a lot of sense to me. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair.
The next presentation, if we move on, is the Warrington Voluntary Action overview on current volunteer situation from Alison. So if Alison can join us and tell us a little bit about what the current situation is, that would be great.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I haven't got a presentation, but I will give a brief overview of volunteering in Warrington and how that could then be related to the food pantry, which we've already talked about, and supporting the food poverty agenda. So since March, we had a total of over 1,600 volunteers that signed up with ourselves. Obviously something fantastic coming out of a terrible pandemic, the number of people coming forward, and that just isn't the ones that came forward to WVA. Volunteers have been active right across the town. But what we did with the ones that signed up with us, we obviously took their details. That would also include if they already had a DBS, we had to find out what types of cars they had. So even those who were going out doing some of the food deliveries, what insurance they had on the car, their availability, skills and experience, etc. So that was actually quite a big task to start gathering that information, because the volunteers were doing all sorts of different things. From, I've listed here some of the main things that we did over the summer that were related to working with the Safe and Well team. Must admit, we've worked throughout with Warrington Borough Council and the Safe and Well, and that's a really good thing that came out of COVID as well. So just putting that out. So yeah, we had volunteers doing telephone reassurance calls with individuals, delivering the prescriptions. Tracy mentioned it before, we had a number of volunteers on a rota basis helping out at Fernhead Community Centre, packing the food parcels and delivering them. And unfortunately, on some occasions, going around collecting them to bring them back as well. I know, yeah, nothing to do with Tracy's team at all, Chris's team. It was actually those people who were shielded and getting the free parcels from the government. So many people said, I don't actually need one, but I want to give it to somebody who does. So getting volunteers to go around collecting them, to take them to Fernhead so that they could go to people who needed them. At one point, we had a man with a van going round, a volunteer with a van. But volunteers were also involved in delivering Safe and Well leaflets. 81, surprising to me, signed up to drive paramedics around for the CCG, because at one point they were going to do testing at the doorstops. And yeah, so the volunteers, we needed to check out what type of car they had. They had to have a 5-door car. And the number of people coming forward who had small cars, a Fiat 500, like, no, sorry, you can't do it. But people just really wanted to help out. And then we also had 8 volunteers that we trained up to be town centre ambassadors. So when the town opened back up, they were going to help with the helping people to follow the signage, etc. So they're still on board as well. So from this year, we still have 1,630 volunteers on our database. We do send them out regular information. We do tell them things that are going on, not just with ourselves, with the local authority, but also with other community and voluntary organisations to see where they want to join, just to keep that momentum going, really, because this is the first time we've had in Warrington just such a large bank of volunteers who want to help out in the community, but more on an ad hoc basis rather than I do every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning. It's sort of just call on me if you need me. So we've currently got, well, the number's just gone up since we did this, 102 volunteers supporting with the marshalling for the COVID vaccinations. So they're at off Jubilee Hub and the Halliwell Jones. We've got another group going to start at the Islamic Centre as from next week. And this week we have a number of volunteers being trained up to do the lateral flow testing as well. So when that widens up into some other areas, maybe volunteers can help out, because actually the local authority can't keep staffing people to be doing absolutely everything. So where volunteers can help out, who want to help out as well, we may as well engage with them. We do and have done all the way through the pandemic, and still do coordinate volunteers for the food bank on a rota basis. So I think this is where we know having volunteers on a rota does work. So we coordinate 26 volunteers for the food bank for their rota. So they've got their own volunteers, but because they're every time we get when we're in tier 4 or when it's the lockdowns, they've got an increase in deliveries. So we help out with that. And as I'd said at the very beginning, just before the meeting, myself and Tracy were talking about it, we still have, it's 32 people who are waiting to start at the food pantry and ready to get going when it opens, which is good. And if any of them move on, I don't think we need to worry that there isn't going to be people to fill their spaces. Volunteering really is, people just want to help out and volunteer. We also now run a Good Neighbours project, providing low-level support. So there's 72 volunteers signed up for that. So they're doing shopping, prescriptions, home visit check-ins. So we've had a number of those where a family member doesn't live in Warrington and is actually really worried about mum. So we've had a volunteer just knock on the window, check if everything's okay, and then got back in touch with us, and we've either shared that information with the family or the Safe and Well service, because sometimes elderly people are at home and don't really want to mind the family members, and they're saying, yeah, I'm fine, you know, but the family's a little bit worried about them. So we're doing the home visits as well for the volunteers, just to sort of do that knock on the window, etc. So I think there's real opportunities for volunteers to be involved in Food Pantry and other areas of work, especially if when it is up and running, it could be expanded across the town, because I've just given a brief update on the volunteer demographics, and throughout this we've not seen any area where there's significantly more volunteers than another area. There is an age group of around 45 to 60 is the highest, but they have been anything from 18 upwards. We have had quite a lot of elderly people asking to volunteer, and especially at the beginning when it was shielding, sometimes there's a bit of concern about that. We've actually had quite a few people who've had their vaccine and now want to be vaccine volunteers to help out. So actually, no, that's not appropriate, because you need to still be following the government guidance in terms of staying at home, and it's quite difficult to tell volunteers who really want to help out or give something back that some people still need to be really still shielding, still looking after themselves. The makeup of volunteers has been a massive mix, so it's people who've been furloughed, which actually I thought would have been higher than it was, but it was just 14% now. But a lot of people maybe who were in sales, and quite a lot of health professionals as well. Quite a few people are in IT as well, so it seems quite a few people who are working and now doing home working are sort of thinking, oh, I could probably just go and volunteer on a Wednesday afternoon and continue my home working in the evening. So they're sort of making their lifestyles a bit more flexible to fit work and volunteering in. Obviously, once furlough ends at the end of April, and when we come out of this, I think we all agree there's probably going to be a much higher number of people unemployed. So there will probably be an increase in people who are unemployed volunteering as well. But I think if we've really got some opportunities for them to engage, and we can keep people engaged and support them to find new opportunities in employment. What we have had fed back to us from the volunteers engaged is about doing this ad hoc volunteering, just helping out when they can. I mean, quite often we've just given a phone call or a text or whichever way they like being contacted to say, actually, could you just pop over to go and see Mrs. Jones? She just lives around the corner from you, just to see if she's okay. Or somebody needs some baby milk collecting who's self-isolating at the moment, so they can't go out. And people are quite happy to do that, because it sort of takes them an hour out of the time. What we would like to see is just really keep encouraging these people to stay and be part of a bank of volunteering, and just give them the opportunities and let them know about them when they arise. And that can be anything from, obviously we're talking about food tonight, but it could be around the Rugby League World Cup, local events that are happening, cultural events. So I think if something's come out of this COVID pandemic, it is about our community spirit and how people in Warrington have really sort of rise to the challenge and engaged in our communities and volunteered, not just for WVA, but across the whole of the borough.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Any questions for Alison on the work of WVA around the numbers of volunteers at the moment, or the situation? Nobody?
Chair?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I tried to get in before, but I couldn't unmute. I just wanted to say thank you to Tracy as well for the report that she did. And really interested about moving people on, and I'd like to have further conversations with her at some point, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. I think it's really, you know, there has been this upsurge in volunteer action. We've seen it, and I know the volunteers that I work with, I think they're all signed up with Warrington Voluntary Action and doing great stuff. I think the idea of the training I'm really interested in. If you could let us have details of what sort of training packages are going to be available for volunteers, and how we can get them onto them, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think that's perhaps something that could be circulated to all the committee members and even wider. If we look at that, how Warrington Voluntary Action are now providing training packages for volunteers. And certainly, it's a big thing for a volunteer to get some training and some way of moving on. It's a big encouragement into sticking with volunteering to help. I think it's I think
the training Tracy was talking about from us was actually the training around the food pantry.
But that might also apply to people again who are doing food share.
Yeah,
offers.
Definitely. Yeah,
it might be a help in that scenario, and there are a lot of overlaps on the two offers, I think. Are there any more questions for Alison?
Yeah. Can I?
Yes,
I'm looking at maybe some bespoke packages as well for, we're talking about trying to get them back into employment and
yes.
I don't know, but we might have a group of people who require a little bit of training in a certain thing, and maybe is that something that we could sort of...
Yeah, definitely. And we do something called Make Your Volunteering Count, because sometimes I think people who do volunteer don't realise that they're actually they've got transferable skills there. And sometimes, I've seen application forms and I think, but you've been volunteering, or that was just my volunteering, and actually you've developed all of these skills, and it's about giving them that sort of, I think we called it a volunteer passport at the time, to say, well, you've got this, you've done this, and collecting everything together and helping them to build up the CV through a training package, which is actually telling them what they're already doing in terms of the volunteering.
That's very good. Yeah, I think that's important. That they're recognised for what they do, and there's some way of validating that. Yeah, thank you.
I think it also addresses some of the things that we were saying earlier about people addressing the situation of how people get into the difficulties in the first place. If we can work on the training and education, and basically needs to go further back than the age group probably of volunteers, but it certainly is a step in the right direction to finding out how we can address some of the difficulties that people seem to have, and maybe they're not aware of how they can get out of it. Okay, anything else? So we will move on and have the Central Six Community Forum update from Dave Appleton, who is joining us on the phone, so we won't be able to see him, but he can talk us through his the presentation from the Central Six Community Forum. Are you there, Dave?
Hi, Jean. Yes, I am.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Right, so we've got the slides. Do about Chris Whitter.
There we go. Yeah. We have our first slide on, Dave.
Right, so the community food provision. Yeah?
Yeah.
So for those who don't know me, I'm Dave Appleton. I'm on the Central Six Committee, and we've been talking about food poverty in Warrington now for a long, long time. Am I echoing? Are we okay?
No, you're okay.
Okay. And as well as that, I'm a store manager for the co-op, and I help to coordinate the food share in each of our 24 stores throughout the area. So I've got quite a little bit of knowledge on food share and the operations that we've got out there in the town. So second slide. So as we all probably aware, in Warrington there's different offerings that are available to us. The one that we probably all know about is the Warrington Food Bank, who goes under the Trussell Trust. We've had a great presentation from Tracy on the Pantry. And then we've got fair share and food share, and I will go into more detail on the next slides about what them offerings are. And the end result is to obviously prevent food poverty, reduce food waste, and that's in the homes and the businesses, as well as tackling social isolation, and working together as a community and helping to signpost people as well, which has already been alluded to this evening, to other services and support groups that are out there. So my next slide. Again, a little bit more about what is on offer throughout Warrington in a bit more detail. So we've got the food bank. We all know it's referral based, and there's only so many times you can use it, and you will go in and pick up a bag that's already prepared and no choice of what you get in and taking it away with you. With the likes of the food share, it's predominantly fresh foods and mainly veggies and bread and end of life. We also help to tackle holiday hunger. A lot of that is around the school's holidays, and I know Jean's worked for many years on that, in making up packed lunches for school children to ensure that every children gets fed, whether the schools are in or not, and that happens around Warrington. And also in there's groups that were set up with COVID to help to support the elderly and the vulnerable, and making up packs and to deliver that throughout the town. We've also got things like most of the food shares, it's not means tested, it's completely voluntary, and it's relying on people's goodwill to come along and just take what they need to help to support the family in making a meal for that day. And the end result is we're helping with food poverty, and we're also reducing food waste, which is helping the retailers, they're not having to put it in a bin, and also they're helping to the environmentals at the same time. So the next slide in a little bit more detail. So fair share, Tracy did mention fair share, and a lot of people might not fully understand how fair share works. Fair share in many ways is an umbrella for other groups. They receive stock from retailers, from distribution networks, and it's predominantly bulk stock, which is surplus to requirements. A lot of it's short dated, but not all of that. Also, organisations such as the Co-op use fair share. So recently we committed to donating £3 million to help poverty, food poverty, and we distributed that to fair share for them to distribute that on the Co-op's behalf to the community groups that are in Warrington and much further beyond and around the country. So people like the homeless shelter use this, community cafes, the Pantry, luncheon clubs, any group or organisation can apply to be part of fair share and get the benefits that are there. The next slide, which is on food share. So food share, I've probably been working with since I first met Ames about 3 years, I think about 3 years ago now, and she'd set up her own little happy hub to help to feed the town and to stop food going to waste at the same time. So what is food share? It's predominantly excess, short-dated and damaged stock from all the retailers that basically is not being sold at the end of the night. In how that works mainly, if a food share group came into my store at the very end of the night, they can collect every little bit of stock we've got left. It's a bit of potluck, what's going to be available. There could be abundance of one thing or a mixture of or nothing at all. It's really much what's not been sold, and that can differ from retailer and store to store. It is predominantly produce and a lot of fresh bread, but you do get other bits and bobs at the same time. It's all free of charge to the community groups. It is encouraging the people to work together. It's helping the supermarkets by helping to promote and feed the country. And I think the co-op announced that last year through the food share they donated 5 million meals through that. In with that, we've also got the different groups, which I think we've probably all heard of one or two of them, but on counting, there's actually 20 different satellite groups throughout the town offering some sort of food share. The likes of Amy's Happy Hub, based in Orford and Latchford and Fairfield. We've got Friends of Meadowside and Leave No One Behind. The Good Guys, we've got Latchford. So there's plenty out there. Next slide. That's just some statistics. Hopefully everyone can see them. It's estimates what we've worked off from the groups that have supplied us with information. And you can see there's some probably outstanding figures there of what actually available in terms of 14,000 meals a week. 180 collections, that's all the supermarkets. Some supermarkets, people may be collecting once or twice a day from them, going in the morning and then them of an evening. The reliance on 30 volunteer drivers. Obviously, they all need some money for some petrol, and where does that actually come from? Then we've got the volunteers, over 50 volunteers spread out across Warrington, helping to deliver the food share. And we've got every supermarket supporting this throughout the town as well. So the last slide is mainly what would we like to happen. You know, there's a lot of groups out there doing some amazing things, and they're all working away. And what you'll probably realise, and they all like to stick to themselves and want to be supporting their community and very precious about it as well. So what we feel would work is if we could get each of the food shares under an umbrella, where they could just go to one site and know, click in their postcode, where they live, and see what group is closest to them and what days they're available. It'd be great if we could have a central point, because at the moment we've got volunteers collecting from each supermarket. We might even have two different groups collecting from the same supermarket, passing each other, and then they get back to their hub. And what have they got? You could have one group in Sanke who's got nothing but potatoes and bananas, and in Fairfield they could have an abundance of fresh bread and cakes. And if we could get them all together and distribute it a little bit better, each of the groups would have a better choice of products, which would help to make a meal for a family. So in summary, really, is we'd love it if we could get some support in providing a support network in terms of premises, because at the moment with COVID, we've got people doing it from the gardens, which isn't right. We need a premises room. We do need some refrigeration to help to keep them products safe and secure. We also need to work with the likes of the voluntary action people to make sure that these people have got food safety in mind. And wonderful probably as well if we had the kite mark as well to say, yeah, these are recognised as carrying out every little bit of policy procedure that we're looking for, and they're part of the umbrella, which would go under whatever name we could think of. But basically, in summary, we are preventing food waste, each of the groups. They've all got the best intentions. They're all signposting people to other groups, and the likes of the school swap shop and things like that can get involved. But I think we do need to support them in becoming more of a working together for the good of the town to be successful and probably take it to the next level, if that's the direction we're looking at. And that's it for me. If anyone's got any questions for me.
Thank you, Dave. That was really interesting and informative. Anybody got questions for Dave? Sharon?
It's not a question, it's just to say thank you very much for all of that. It was a really interesting report and for all the work that's being done. And I think that your idea of an umbrella would actually help in terms of people not duplicating the same activities and the same resources. So I think if you could move ahead on that somehow, I think that would be really beneficial. I don't know if the Borough Council can help in any way in that respect.
Maybe there's something we could look into going forward, you know.
Yeah, can I speak if it's...
Yes, Councillor Wright.
I know the food share that I've sort of been involved with in where I am, that comes under Happy Hub as sort of like the umbrella organisation. So whether that's not understood by other groups or whether those groups don't fall underneath that Happy Hub.
I think the point, perhaps, if we can come back to Dave on that, the umbrella is more of a loose term. Dave, can you?
Yeah, we still want each of the, well, I'd like each of the groups to still be independent and have their independence, but to work together, and so the community recognise one name or one Facebook site where they can go to be directed, but then for each of the groups to work together in terms of an even distribution of the food, like I said, rather than people walking away with one product, walking away with a mixed bag.
Does that clarify it for you, Steve, a little bit?
Oh no, I agree. I agree. I was just saying that I thought that was like an umbrella organisation. Happy Hub. That's all I was saying. I'm not.
Yeah, Happy Hub is.
Day.
Yeah, Happy Hub is. But going, I think we're looking at the next level from that, where we've got Happy Hub, Friends of Medicide, and there's a couple of others. I can't remember all the names now, but they've all got several distribution points. But each of them could have their own surplus of something. I know we had 15 boxes of bananas yesterday, which we could have, shared and swapped about a bit, and maybe if people were working together more. So I think that's the idea of that umbrella, and also to have a signposting facility if there was a joint Facebook website page. We may be able to use My Life Warrington or something that would tell people which food share was open when, whether it was Happy Hub or Friends of Medicide. But if you're really desperate for some food and the one you normally go to isn't open, you could have a look and see where there is another one that you might be able to use. I think that's the idea behind that, and the groups work together more. Anybody got any comments on that?
I think that's a really good idea, because then you've not got they're all over the place. But I have found though there's a bit of oh, we're nothing to do with them, we're separate, and it'd be nice if they could come together, but I don't know you're going to work that, because there's some strong personalities.
There are. I think that from the Central Six point of view, I'm sorry that I'm sort of I've got two hats on here, but the thought of having a standard of delivery that people could sign up to would be the start of building that umbrella.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that would be a good thing as well.
Yeah, so that you could say this group have been approved by the council as agreeing to follow a certain set of rules. and also the rules for that the supermarkets ask for as well. Sharon?
No, I think that's I think it's a really positive step forward, and it gives sort of a bit of a guarantee in terms of safeguarding and all of those other issues that you know you don't like to think about, but you need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Chair. I know the group side that we want to voluntary action, don't they? As a way of ensuring that I know the ones I work with are signed that we want to voluntary action.
Yeah. I think Councillor Wright, you're right. A lot of them have signed up with Warrington Voluntary Action, and I think the idea of having some sort of kite mark or quality assurance at some sort of level, so there's safeguarding, etc., or following certain standards is a really good idea. So completely different, but we've just spent 6 months doing one with the CCG and local authority around mental health. So for those groups that support individuals that are doing peer support, to have a kite mark. So I think it might be a good idea for food.
Chrissy, could I just mention something? It's Chris Skinkis. I think it's essential, this, and I think it's it's a next step forward, and it's something that is required, because I think it provides a lot of it provides a lot of reassurance to people who are in receipt of the food, that the quality of the food and the handling and the storage of the food is consistent and is safe, and if that's reflected in an umbrella organisation, if it's consistent across a number of groups that join an umbrella, that's really important. I think as well it would help to prevent a lot of the competitiveness between groups in terms of their particular patch and their particular territory. And I think David made a really good point in his presentation about it creates that opportunity within that network or that umbrella to share and trade food, so that there's a better even distribution of high quality produce. It maximises the volunteering opportunities and everything else, and I think it would work really well. It's not something that can be enforced. We can't make people join an umbrella and establish the same degree of standards, but I think that most of those groups, and I've spoken to one today actually, would really welcome it, and would, as opposed to seeing it as a negative thing, would really want to see this as the next stage of their evolution. And I would say that if it was something that was the umbrella was something, Alison might cringe when we saying this, but I think if it was something that was of within the voluntary sector as opposed to within the council, those groups would probably feel more likely to want to be involved and more, and have a trusted relationship with an organisation like WVA, and then obviously would have the support and the resources and some of the professional resources and support from within the council as partners in that. So I think it's a natural evolution. I think it really is the next step in terms of unifying this and making sense and working to our strengths. So I would really support that as an outcome from tonight's meeting, and in terms of a recommendation, I think it would be really helpful.
Okay, is everybody in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Yes,
Generally,
Definitely.
So, brilliant. So how do we move forward on this then? So do we make a recommendation from our committee that we look into it, or do we ask Alison whether Warrington Voluntary Action would have the time to do this?
Chair, we've already been contacted by Cheshire Community Foundation to look into this, because they were quite conscious of a number of things they were looking at, but they hadn't distributed as much money to a lot of the food groups in Warrington due to governance, a few other things, and actually getting those standards in place. So they'd contacted me probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago to sort of mull this idea over. So to hear you all saying, actually, that sort of thing is a good idea, sort of fits everything together. In Cheshire West, they have a food network, and what happens is exactly as David had said would be a fantastic idea is, I mean, they're all meeting obviously virtually at the moment, but have regular meetings and share their resources. And like they'd said before, there's too many bananas in one place, somebody's got enough bread. It's about sharing that. They did say it probably took about a year to get everybody on the bus. There was a few core groups who came together, but it took a while because, as a few of you've alluded to, is that some of them, well, that's our group, we do this is our food, but actually understanding the bigger picture so that all of our residents who need food are getting food. But yes, so I can follow it up, and I'll get back in touch with you, Chair, about that, about progress on that, and a conversation that I've been having with Cheshire Community Foundation and actually Chris as well, so we could start to follow that up.
Fantastic. So we've got a planned route forward, and we can report back to the scrutiny committee that this is the plan that we recommend, and that we need to include in that the referral and the spotting of people who need help, and how we get people out of the poverty trap, so that they're not becoming dependent on these food share offers in the community. So I guess that we need to sort of discuss that side of it as well. We've got the recommendation for making sure that the provision in the community is at a reasonable standard, but also the point that was brought earlier, that people, how are they getting into this situation in the first place? We haven't really addressed that one. Was that a
Oh, your boss? Yeah. Sorry.
Are you waving to Tracy's mum, Chris? Are you? He's on mute still. Okay. So everybody's gone very quiet now. So what would be our feedback now then to the scrutiny committee? In answer to the question.
Chair?
Yes,
Councillor. It's very important that the groups don't feel that they're being done to, and I know that won't happen. And absolutely. I do think that Warrington Voluntary Action are best placed to sort of ensure that. It's about inviting them to join in something that's positive.
Yes.
I think we get it right, and that's the best way. And ensuring that they understand that it's there to help them do better, rather than take things away from them.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I'd like to make sure.
That should be the angle that we come from, definitely.
Yes. Yeah. I agree.
And that is indeed what we want to do. We don't want to be telling anybody they shouldn't be doing anything, or stopping people from doing something. We want to help them to do what they do even better than they're doing already, and keep themselves and everybody else safe.
I used to have a phrase when I was the mayor, Chair. I used to go around and I say to people, you can't keep telling communities they should be doing stuff and then follow up by saying, but not that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to recognise the good, and we need to build on it and share it as best we can. Yeah. And I think David's brilliant presentation, so thanks, Dave.
Yeah, big thank you to Dave for that one. He's a very good ambassador to the community from the retail shops. Okay, so are we all happy with progress on that?
Yes, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, so we know what we're doing.
Yes,
thank you. So we'll move on to the work programme for 2021. We may have one more meeting before the election, if it does in fact take place in May, which is at the moment they're saying it will, but we have a meeting scheduled for the 21st of April. And on our work programme, We were looking to add the updating changes and procedures regarding prosecution of fly tippers, and the Central 6 Community Forum project relating to small green spaces and community parks, pocket parks, and how the Parks and Woodlands team could help with the development and sustainability of those. So those 2 items we are looking at putting on the agenda for April, for our April discussions. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, silence is accepted as yes. Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is the schedule of meetings. Sorry?
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry, it's Abigail, the clerk to the committee. I think we still have one update to do, which is from Anne-Marie Carr, just the update of what other authorities are doing and how Warrington compares.
Oh, I do apologise. Yes. No. I'm sorry, yeah, sorry. I do apologise. We have to go back to Anne-Marie's update of what other authorities are doing and how we compare to them. I do apologise, Anne-Marie. Please, can you give us that update?
Okay, so I've got a very short presentation. So I work for public health, so I've got a real interest in how food and the food we eat, how it impacts on our health, and that's both our psychological and emotional well-being as well as our physical health. But it's particularly important at the minute that people are staying physically healthy as a protection against COVID. And if they do contract COVID, they're in the best place to recover from COVID as well. So this is all the more important for us in public health at the minute. So I've had a chat with people on some national webinars, and I've spoken to a few colleagues across the Northwest as well. And so the information I'm bringing to this meeting, I'm really happy to say, agrees with and supports everything that's been discussed so far. So that's a really positive, really positive start to this. It may be useful for us to look at the issue by looking at 2 different terminologies. So if we look at food poverty, that's where households don't have enough income to buy food, adequate food for the household. And that can be when people have lost jobs, or somebody's died suddenly, or there's been a problem with benefits coming into the home, for example. Food insecurity is a different issue. Food insecurity is where cooking, planning and making meals for the household is not a priority for that house. So that can be for many different reasons. It can be when people are juggling creditors, for example. It's also part of a culture that's built over the last few years, where many households eat the majority of their meals outside of the home. So they eat outside of the home, either from bakeries, from quick grab things that they get from the supermarket, or from fast food outlets as well. Now, that's not to blame people for making those decisions. That's the way that we've created the community around them a lot of the time. So a lot of the time it's really difficult for them to buy fresh foods. It's really easy for them to walk out and buy something cheap off a fast food shop in the high street there. So we need to think about how we're supporting people both in the short term to get out of that food poverty, but also those medium and long term things that we can support people to think differently around how they view food and how they bring food into the house and prepare it for themselves and other members of their family. But certainly both food poverty and food insecurity have some really long-term impacts on family and are a really big part of the health inequalities that we see across the town as well. So if we go to the next slide, this has been mentioned already, but there is a framework that is used across the country, but particularly in London boroughs, and it's called the Food Ladders Framework, and that's where we look at short, medium and long-term solutions and strategies to this issue. So we look at the short-term strategies. It is what's just been discussed there. It's around having a more coordinated and collaborative effort in the town. So what other local authorities have created are called food alliances. Now, the best practice for a food alliance would that it be chaired and coordinated by somebody outside of the local authority. So somebody who could be seen as a trusted source for all those different third sector organisations that have popped up. Quite often isn't going to be somebody from the council, it's going to be somebody who's already in the third sector. So that's just exactly what you've just been talking about. But that cross-referencing gives us the best coverage in the town. So not only does it mean that we're maximising the resources in terms of donated food and volunteer time, it also means we can keep an eye on who is getting who's getting free food from where, so we can support those families in the best way. So we want to move them on, we want to give them food parcels and emergency food parcels for a short period and then get them onto the next step of that ladder. If they've been able to just like ping pong between different charities getting food for a long period of time, we're not supporting that household the best way we can. Part of having that food alliance is already, as discussed, we'd have a minimum standard that we'd like people to have within those packages. Part of that should always be items that they can prepare a meal. So not just something fast that they can just eat out of a packet, but something about what they're thinking about putting a meal together. That's a really important part of it. And the other thing that we'd like to see is that with all food that goes out, it comes along with lots of other information of what's available in the town. So certainly debt advice, credit union advice, where people can get mental health support, family support as well. So it'd be great if every food package, no matter where it came from, had the same standardised information going out. That would be another part of the coordination we'd be looking at. Then if I go on to the next slide, the medium-term strategies. This was very much building upon the food pantry idea. So talking to colleagues in Manchester, there's a charity there called Healthy Me, Healthy Communities, and they run a community grocer project, which is very similar to our food pantry project. You pay £2.50 to get £12 worth of food, and they use all the same principles as we do in Warrington. It's just that it's at a much larger scale. So each neighbourhood, each community centre would have a grocer project, and it's staffed by a very large number of peer supporters. So those volunteers are from people in that area. So the rules are you have to be 15 minutes walk away from that community centre to benefit from the grocer project or to volunteer in that grocer project. So it is that very much people feel they can talk about the issues that they're experiencing to somebody who's from that area. So that building trust is a really big part of that. They've also managed to expand on that project by having group cooking and eating sessions. So that social connection part of it is when we start seeing how people can build resilience for themselves by building their confidence by being in contact with more people in the same situation as they are. And then they can share solutions and share ways that they've moved on in their lives as well. So that social element is a really big element of it. The other element that we've had in Warrington previous as well is helping people plan and shop. So if you live in an area where your only shopping option is maybe one of those small supermarkets that has a really very restricted number of food items you can buy from, going to a big supermarket can be very overwhelming and it can make people really anxious. So holding people's hands and taking them to a big supermarket and helping them see what they could get for their available budget is a big part of this, and it's just, again, adding to those skills. So if you look at the next slide, this is just a few of the outcomes that we've got from that Manchester project. And it just shows you that I think it's 89% of the people who attend that say that their health and well-being has improved since they were a member of that community project. And over 90% of them as well know more people than they used to know in their local area after being part of that project. So it's everything we've talked about, but just building on it and just resourcing it all the better. There we are, there we've got the, there we go, 96% of people who take part in it think they know more people. So it's just really building on that community cohesion and those community strengths that we know is part of the problem when people feel isolated at home. Then, you know, that's really poor for their mental health and they start making, you know, worse decisions for themselves as well. I know we haven't got much time left, so if we move on to the last slide, when we start looking at long-term solutions, this is then we take a lot of responsibility away from the community then, and this is then back to us as council officers on what we're doing to create an environment where people have better choices. It's easy for them to make better choices for themselves. A lot of what we want to plan for the long-term strategies are actually included in that Central 6 Master Plan actions that we've got. So creating more jobs and creating more jobs that work in synergy with the benefit system. So universal credit was brought in to make sure that people who at work are always better off than people who are on benefits. but you have to think about how many hours that works for, how many hours people can work for while caring for children, maybe, so that universal credit works. So we need to think a little bit more around that. We need to think more around job skills. So when big industries and big organisations come into the town, us having an agreement of how many local people they will take, and we ensure that those local people have the right skills to get into those jobs. There's something about good quality affordable housing that is centred around a dining area, a good kitchen and a good dining area, so people move into those homes and it's centre of the home, that they believe that they're going to sit round a table as a family and eat meals together. That is something that not all modern houses and a lot of what we're building in the town isn't focused around that, so we need to have a think about that. The way we plan where supermarkets are, the way we plan where hot food takeaways are allowed to open, it's just a lot of that infrastructure stuff. Again, like I say, it's not so much the community work now, this is the stuff for people in the council to think of. And lastly, it is an adoption of that strength-based approach. So any kind of service within the council should have the same approach, where we're helping people make better decisions for themselves. We're not telling people what they should and shouldn't do. We're giving them better opportunities to make better choices for themselves, and that takes time. So we're not talking about short-term investments or short-term projects. We're talking about 10, 15, 20 years, we'll have the same policies and same projects in place. That's the only thing that's going to make the difference, really, to our communities. Sorry, I've rushed that because we've run out of time, but if there's any questions of anyone.
Chair, for a comment.
Of course, yes.
Thank you. I think I get all that. I think the service that we're doing, the sort of stuff we're doing now in our communities, is shaped by COVID and its restrictions, and so we have tailored the support to fit as best we can the need that's out there with the resource that we've got, and a lot of time the unavailability, if that's the right word, I mean, the community centres are as accessible, if accessible at all. So some of the other work, the other relationships, the other engagement is more difficult to happen. But I think what has happened is that people have stepped up in unprecedented circumstances and done their best to help with the community. So that's got to be lauded and appreciated. I think you've also, so that goes without saying that we know that's happened, and we know that when we get out of this in a better world, we'll be trying to do things in a better way, different way, and work together, and all those great ideas that we've had. We've just touched on the fact, what is the escape route? Because if people aren't getting paid enough, if people are worried about the jobs all the time, if they've not got the housing that we're talking about where they can gather around a table. Some of the houses that I work with people, they've got one room and a kitchen and a couple of rooms, and they're trying to homeschool children at home, and they haven't got the space. There's no privacy. They don't all live in big houses with separate places that they can all do the different things. So there's the underlying issues that are affecting lots of people. You know, you talked about the universal credit, how that helps people to be better off if they're in work and stuff. But we've got to get to a stage where somehow that people who find themselves in these situations can see a way out. And it's very difficult at the moment for a lot of people to see the way out. And so at least if they are getting a bit of contact from regular volunteers, people going and saying hello and giving a bit of food and doing what they can, that in many ways that's the best we can expect at the moment. We're all being told now to stay in, only go out if it's absolutely necessary. Stay, you know, it's a dangerous situation we're in. So that's all I'm saying. I think it's a great report, and I think the circumstances are dictated by the conditions that we're in, and we need to, the government or whoever, people, the clever people need to be planning proper escape routes for people that doesn't leave them in despair and doesn't drive them further into doing things that perhaps they wouldn't have done if they had a better frame of mind. And so it's not easy out there for some people. So these are great ideas, and we want to move on with it, but we've got to try and get that baseline right, where people are not in such a situation that they can't see a way out. So that's it, really. Thank you.
Thank you. And so thank you, Anne-Marie. Do apologise for almost missing you, but I'm really glad that we didn't. It was a fascinating report, really, really good. And I think it throws up so many things that this committee could bring onto their work programme going forward. There's a lot of opportunities there to discuss different ideas, from the way we have our houses built, how we can influence the designers and the developers, to influencing what people eat on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much for that. Does anybody else wish to comment on our question, Anne-Marie? Okay, everybody happy?
Chair?
Yes.
Chair, I don't think I've got those slides. Are we getting those?
Yeah, I was going to, yes, please, yeah. If you could have Anne-Marie's slides circulated, Abigail, that would be much appreciated. Yes. Thank you.
No problem. I'll get them circulated after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've covered the work programme thing because I got myself in a muddle. So I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 21st of April, but hopefully in between times we'll have some updates, because we will make some progress with Warrington Voluntary Action on the food share objectives. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Everybody happy?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So at this point, I will say enjoy the rest of your evening, and we would normally say have a safe journey home, but hopefully you're not going too far.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night. Good night.